In the few short years since 2001, more Americans lost their lives on the roads than were killed in action in the Civil War.
It's a leading cause of death amongst young Americans.
One of the most effective public health strategies for reducing that death toll is safety belts, which can cut the risk of a fatality in a crash by 45%. If lawmakers mandated belts tomorrow and America buckled up as a result, an estimated 10,000 lives would be saved each year.
There's clear and unequivocal evidence that when used in a crash, safety belts are approximately 45% effective in reducing deaths and about 50% effective in reducing serious injuries.
Yet despite the compelling nature of the evidence, many policymakers across the country are either unaware of it or choose to ignore it. In more than half the states, there are weak laws on safety belts, and in New Hampshire, for adults, there's no law at all.
We're very proud of our motto. It was declared by one of the Revolutionary War generals. He said, "We are going to live free or die, gentlemen."
We prize small government and freedom too highly to be controlled by government.
Pete Thompson is the Governor's representative on highway safety, and Sherman Packard chairs the Transport Committee in the New Hampshire State House. While both are well aware of evidence that safety belt laws save lives, they prefer education rather than legislation.
Would it be fair to say that the evidence in the case of safety belts is simply ignored?
I don't think that it's simply ignored. This legislature, they're very, very smart people, and I don't think they ignore it. I think they see it, but what trumps seeing the evidence is their feeling about the freedom that we have here in the state. So I think that's what it is.
We just don't feel that mandatory laws should be forced down people's throats when it comes to issues of personal safety.
The evidence that's been overlooked in New Hampshire and elsewhere comes from a 2001 systematic review by the Task Force on Community Preventive Services. That review summarised 33 studies of safety belt laws, finding they increase belt use by 33% and decrease deaths by 9%. One of the reviewers was Jim Nichols, at that time a senior figure inside the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
New Hampshire is the only state in the United States that doesn't have an adult safety belt law. I think that many lives would be saved if they had an adult safety belt law. I don't think there's any other way to interpret the literature.
A systematic review of all studies tends to produce much more reliable evidence than a single study. Systematic reviews are less prone to bias because reviewers must be open about the methods they use to search for relevant studies, assess their quality, and then summarise their results.
They're the ultimate in terms of research evidence. You know that they have been conducted in a very systematic, unbiased, transparent way. The systematic reviews, they go through and they throw out the bad research. They keep only the good research, and in a transparent process, they show what the results are.
Another textbook case of values trumping good public health evidence is motorcycle helmets. More than 70,000 bikers are injured each year, and annual death tolls are rising dramatically, with half of all fatalities among people over 40. Yet despite evidence from a systematic review that helmets prevent death and injury, more than half of all states do not require adult riders to wear a helmet.
Terry, can you give me the latest motorcycle statistics that showed that one we were using yesterday about the fatalities and the ones that were wearing the helmet and that weren't? Can you find it, Terry?
In the summer of 2006, during a national motorcycle gathering, New Hampshire experienced 10 fatalities in just 1 week. Most victims were not wearing a helmet.
You see the evidence from National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and then you have the political side of it. And when I go to the hearings and listen to the arguments of the people who are representing the people of the state of New Hampshire, their feeling is very much that they want to have the right to choose in that instance.
Do I believe that seatbelts and helmets, probably save lives and reduce injuries? I do believe that. But in the same respect, I believe that, personal responsibility and government intrusion is more harmful than maybe, unfortunately, a few people getting injured.
Good evidence about how helmets prevent bike injuries comes from a systematic review produced by the respected Cochrane Collaboration, which summarised 53 studies and found helmets reduced the risk of head injury by 72%. Yet bikers groups have persuaded policymakers in most states to reject helmet laws.
Opposing such laws, you have a strong advocacy group that is very interested in the ride.
Do you think there should be a universal helmet law in New Hampshire?
No, I don't. I wear a helmet almost all the time, but I think that people should have that right to choose whether they want to wear one or not. If they don't want to wear one, that's up to them.
They are willing to ignore research for their enjoyment of that ride.
These days, a respected consultant to federal government agencies, Jim Nichols specialises in evaluating programs and reviewing research. A specialist in using evidence to influence policy, he only has limited success convincing his two sons of the value of helmets.
Yeah, look where it is now, and it's a constant battle, and try to pick your battles. They don't get on the ramps without them.
The real success story of evidence informing public health policy is drunk driving laws, where a systematic review from the Task Force on Community Preventive Services helped influence a key congressional committee.
With the Task Force on Community Preventive Services is the first time, at least in my career, that I was involved in a real systematic review. And it's a much more laborious, much more painstaking process, and certainly when you get evidence from it, it's probably among the best evidence.
That 2001 review summarised 9 studies and found that laws lowering blood alcohol concentrations to 0.08 brought a reduction in road deaths of 7%.
That would be my best example of how I believe the systematic reviews made a difference.
The review of drunk driving laws was delivered straight to the desks of a powerful congressional committee.
We were able to get it to the committee. I was told that it got into the hands of the committee and they did consider it. Who knows how important it was, but at least it was there and the right decision came out.
The blood alcohol story shines as an example because, unlike safety belts and helmets, Congress ruled states that didn't comply would be sanctioned. As a result, every state has adopted the national standard, informed by the systematic review.
Our experience with federal government has been that when we have used incentives, they've worked modestly well, but when we've used sanctions, sanctions work better.
In New Hampshire, General Stark's defiant live free or die speech is being used by many people 200 years later to reject public health strategies for which there is strong evidence. Despite being considered a gold standard for credible evidence, the systematic review is not informing policy here.
We're looking at this notion of systematic review evidence. Are you familiar with that? Is that evidence that is given more credibility here or not?
We try to take as much evidence as we can, and statistics and data is what drives the Highway Safety Agency.
Is there an awareness, do you think, among policymakers of the value of systematic review evidence rather than evidence from single studies?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. It's probably somewhere in the middle of it. I just don't know.
To what extent does the Transportation Committee that you chair rely on systematic reviews of the evidence about traffic safety?
We look at it all. We look at the good stuff, we look at the bad stuff, we try and decipher through the good stuff and the bad stuff. You know, we have done a lot for younger drivers. You know, there's
How do you know what the good stuff is and the bad stuff is?
well, after a while, you got to try and decipher through it.
In public health, the job of deciphering good evidence from bad should soon become a whole lot easier, as more and more policymakers learn about the power of modern scientific methods to assess the effectiveness of public health interventions.
I believe that in the end, the research evidence will prevail. Remember, this is research evidence. This is what we see to be the truth. These things work.